So there's this one indie character that I really want to talk about today. He's pretty underrated, underground. His powers aren't really all that. His villains, he got like a couple of movies and a couple TV shows and a song.
A Spiderman does whatever a spider can.
Icy pop? Alright, but seriously, I originally planned for this to be a comparatively more comprehensive and structured video, but I realize I don't have that in me, so I'm just gonna yap for however long it takes for me to get my point across. Let's do it. So it's June, halfway through the year 2024, and Spider-Man has managed to snag not one, not two, not three cameos, one being in a completely different IP. I mean, technically it wasn't him, but it was him. It's Josh Keaton. But the purpose of this video is just to talk about his own projects, because it has been, when did No Way Home come out? I believe 2020, let me Google this before I get clapped. In 2021, Spider-Man No Way Home released. It has been 3 years. And it seems with all these cameos and appearances, they're trying to get us hyped. They're rolling it out. They're getting us ready for his own stuff. Because he's coming back, and he coming back better than ever. Bigger, badder, faster, stronger, smarter. And with that looming threat of webbage, I figured I'd make a video going over some of my thoughts and speculation concerning some of the upcoming Spider-Man projects that we know of, including Spider-Man 4, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and a little bit of Across the Spider-Verse. I kind of want to keep this video Peter-centric. Final scene of No Way Home gave us a pretty vague, but a good idea of where Marvel and Sony want to take Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It's going to be a much more personal story, because Peter is now isolated from pretty much everyone he knew and everyone who knew him. We saw him studying for his GED, so most likely he'll be in college when we see him next. With him being in college, I wonder if he'll meet any students, like classmates that we know, like a Gwen Stacy, or maybe even a Felicia Hardy if they want to go that way. There's a rumor saying that it's going to take place about 1 year after the events of No Way Home, which will place it somewhere between the events of Miss Marvel and the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which I loved. He should probably be in college at this time and have some more experience being on his own as Spider-Man. I'm really just hoping that they let him keep his new suit, because I know they want to sell toys and all that, but oh my god, it just clicked. They want to sell toys. There's going to be a new suit. There has to be a new suit. The symbiote. Okay, so I saw a rumor saying that the symbiote is going to be heavily involved. I didn't completely buy into it, because I personally thought that they were going to save the symbiote for maybe the second movie. But I guess it would make sense if they're going to do another trilogy thing where they're telling a long form story to have the symbiote show up in the first movie. But man, I just think that might be a little too fast. John Watts is no longer going to be directing. I remember him saying that he wasn't going to direct the next trilogy, and he was apparently going to direct the Fantastic Four movie, but he's no longer doing that either. So there's going to be a new director, so that's basically a guarantee that we're going to see something brand new that feels fresh. It's rumored that the director that they have in mind at the moment is James Wan. He directed Fast and Furious 7 that I know of. There were some rumors from before that Kevin Feige wanted Sam Raimi to direct it, but I feel like that's just wishful thinking. Plus, I don't really think I want Sam Raimi to direct Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I want something new. But that's all to say that there's likely going to be a complete revamp and change of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, the way we see him in the MCU, and I'm all here for it. I'm just hoping it's something really good. The cinematography, the swinging scenes, the storytelling. I just want to see something just brand new and fresh. Not that I did not like John Watts' take on Spider-Man. I actually really love the MCU Spider-Man, but I want to see just something different. We got a complete trilogy. He got to tell a complete story. Now I want someone else to take the reins and do that again. We kind of expect with Spider-Man at this point that he's just going to get rebooted, and the story's going to be retold in a different lens over and over again. But this time we get to do it with kind of the same Spider-Man actor, so that's kind of cool. This will be the first time that we get a new, fresh take on the same Spider-Man actor. It won't be a complete deviation, but it'll be something that's different. When it comes to the main cast of the previous trilogy, I'm not sure how big of a role they're going to be playing in this new trilogy, if they'll play a role at all in Spider-Man 4. I'm sure maybe MJ might. I'm not sure about Ned or Flash or any of them. Betty Brant. Betty Brant, I actually hope Betty Brant comes back. That'll be a face I'd like to see. And plus, there's so many characters in Spider-Man mythos that they've yet to pull from in the MCU that I would like to see on big screen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, that just would be awesome to broaden the universe, even though, it's kind of half owned by Sony, which I want to talk about that. I'm about to go on a tirade because Sony, if someone at Sony just happens to come across this video, listen to me. I'm about to spit game. You give Marvel the reins to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Let them do what they do. You can still have maybe the distribution rights and like the hold on that money, or half that money, the hold on like the majority of that money. But if you give them Tom Holland's Spider-Man and then have them help you guys bring up Miles Morales live action the same way that they did for the Homecoming trilogy. Are you listening to what I'm saying? This is money. This is like money. You have $1 billion movie here, $1 billion movie here. And this way they get to let Peter Parker intermingle with more of the Marvel Universe without Sony intervention. And you guys have this, you can have your little stranglehold on Miles Morales and you'll make money from both. So think about it. Anyways, I brought up Felicia Hardy before. It's been rumored that she might be the love interest that they're thinking about for this movie, which would be really cool. We need Black Cat in live action in the suit. We saw Felicia Hardy in TASM. She didn't do much. She was just kind of there. But yeah, we need to see her. And I feel like she'd be a really good love interest for a Peter Parker who's kind of has less attachment to his personal life because he's been detached from all of his personal life. A Black Cat and the Spider romance would be kind of perfect right now. If he spends most of his time as Spider-Man, to have a partner and someone to like confide in at the same time would be cool. I'm just saying. Maybe they don't know each other's identities like, how it usually is. She could also just be in college with him, but personally that's not what I have a whole pitch in my head and I might put it at the end of this video, but not really a whole pitch, just some ideas. In No Way Home, Peter realizes how much danger the people close to him can be in. He lost Aunt May. There was that little moment where he saw the bandage on Zendaya's forehead and that kind of just averted him from trying to help her remember or even talking to her. He kind of just distanced himself. So a Black Cat, someone who's competent, someone who can handle himself, that might just be what he needs right now. How exactly her and Peter are going to come into contact, still unknown. She might be a classmate, like I said before. She might work for an Oscorp that might have some kind of plot line in the story that Peter might be connected to, or they could just meet up by chance while suited up, moonlighting. Speaking of super friends, this might be wishful thinking and asking too much of this movie, but I personally believe that this movie is allowed to give us too much. This movie can give us so much. I want to see Daredevil, Matt Murdock, show up in this movie. Hear me out. I got a whole idea on how this can work. It might be shit. It might be the Spider-Man 3 problem with Sam Raimi of having too much villains. But this one, it's not really too much villains. It's kind of just too much characters in my pitch. We'll get to that. People complain about Tom Holland's swinging scenes. They say it's not as good as TASM. It's not as good as Sam Raimi's. Another thing that they complain about is him not being in New York City for a lot of the movies, which I kind of get the complaint. I love my Spider-Man in New York. That's what I want to see from this new trilogy. I want to see a lot more New York-centric Spider-Man stories. And that way we can have him in his natural habitat around a bunch of skyscrapers and buildings that you can swing from. We can make really cool shots from. We have this technology. You guys kind of missed out a little with the Homecoming trilogy to maybe really wow people with the Spider-Man stuff, the swinging and stuff. Not that there wasn't spectacle and wows, but we can have a little more. I want to see a Spider-Man who's just competent, like just 10 times more efficient with the way he uses his webs, the way he fights, the way he maneuvers, the way he thinks. I want to see villains who can like really challenge Spider-Man so that we can see him unleash that Spider Fury, you know what I mean? Like, I want to see what we saw in No Way Home with him versus Norman Osborn. The way he was working that, man, I need to see, well, not the exact same way, but the energy behind it, Maybe not the anger, but the energy behind it. Speaking of villains, I really really, really want a Norman Osborn to show up in this new movie. I feel like after No Way Home, that might be a very good plot thread that we can continue on into the next trilogy. Norman Osborn, he kind of came into his life and ruined his life. He was kind of the Robert that Spider-Man let go. He was kind of that for Peter. And I think it would be cool if we get a new Norman Osborn and we have all that contention and that complex history within Peter's head of Norman Osborn. Like the idea of Norman Osborn will probably be lingering on Peter. Like from here on out, he killed Aunt May. He basically destroyed his life. And to have a new Norman Osborn, maybe someone who doesn't start off as that same evil person, but just Peter just knows in the back of his head that, you know, what he could be, and that causes conflict. My personal fan cast for a Norman Osborn in the MCU was going to be Giancarlo Esposito. If he wasn't going to play, you know, like a Professor X, then it was going to be Norman Osborn. I would have loved to see him in that role. Maybe he's a little too old. They're probably going for a younger one, but it's rumored that Giancarlo might be in Captain America Brave New World, playing not Norman Osborn, at least it seems. So there goes my hopes. When I first saw the images from Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and I saw Norman Osborn, black, with waves, my first thought was, get Giancarlo Esposito to play this man in live action. That's what I wanted. I guess we're not gonna get it. And actually, that was a pretty decent transition into the next topic, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. It was originally called Spider-Man Freshman Year. Obviously, they've changed the name. We got some still images, concept art, some cast details, and they told us that it was somewhat canon to the mainline MCU, at least up to a point. And I believe that's in regard to Peter Parker's origin story. I believe in this show, they'll actually give us the spider bite, like the events of the spider bite, but it'll play out differently from the events leading up to Civil War on. I've heard that they have enlisted the help of Polygon to help with the animation for this project, which kind of fits. They're well versed in 3D animation, and that's kind of the look that Marvel Studios has kind of been going for all of their animated projects, kind of a mix of 3D and 2D. So that should work out well. I hope it looks better than at least Spectacular Spider-Man, because you guys got the budget. Please. So the show is confirmed to take place somewhere around the events of Civil War, probably in the months leading up to Civil War. We get to see an Uncle Ben, maybe, but my personal headcanon for Uncle Ben in the MCU is that he died like a while ago. So it's a quote, very high school driven ensemble show with Peter Parker at the center, which is very Spider-Man. We can expect to see 10 around 30-minute episodes, which isn't too dissimilar from What If and X-Men 97. It's also in that 10 episode range, which I find the 10 episode shows that they've put out so far are some of the best ones. They're some of my favorite ones, like She-Hulk, WandaVision, What If, X-Men 97. Those are some of the ones that really felt like television to me. So similar to What If, this show seems to be set in an alternate reality that kind of branches off from a certain point on the timeline. A reality where instead of Tony Stark finding Peter Parker and taking him under his wing, Norman Osborn gets to Peter first, kind of funding him and giving him all the suits that we saw in concept art. Maybe the voice actor who voiced Peter Parker in What If is going to be voicing Peter in this series, that being Hudson Thames. And as for the rest of the cast, they've revealed quite a lot about these characters. Let's start with villains. We have Norman Osborn, Scorpion, Matt Gargan. We haven't seen Scorpion since, I believe, the end of Homecoming. They've done nothing with that plot thread. Then we have Carmilla Black. She also goes on to become the Scorpion, I believe, later on, maybe after Matt Gargan's death or incarceration. I'm not too familiar with the character. I believe I've seen a female Scorpion before, but I just never knew it was her. We have the Chameleon, longtime Spider-Man villain, one of the first. We have Speed Demon, which is basically an evil speedster. I don't know too much about him either. Tarantula, don't know too much about them. They seem to have these long spikes coming out of their forearm, maybe poisonous, who knows. Unicorn, which is a crazy name. I have to look this up, because why? I'm not gonna lie, a quick Google search did not tell me anything I needed to know about this character, besides he is a former Soviet intelligence agent. He's trained in hand-to-hand combat. I'm guessing he shoots beams out of his little unicorn horn. There's Butane, who looks like the Marvel version of Firefly, DC. Then we have Doc Ock. Everybody knows Doc Ock. We don't know if he's going to be exactly a villain. We don't even know if he's going to have his arms at this point. Maybe he's just working on them as technology and they're not taking over his brain. He might just be a scientist who is probably a teacher at Peter's school or something like that. That's what I've heard. We also have Rhino, looking as comic accurate as he ever can. That block he had. And then we have Bentley Whitman, who's not exactly a villain or not shown to be yet. Yeah, he's shown to be one of Peter's teachers, I believe. But in the comics, he is known as the Wizard, Fantastic Four villain. He's part of the Frightful Four. Who knows? He might be a villain in the show. Maybe some Fantastic Four Easter eggs in this series. I certainly hope so. We saw the, among the other suits in the concept art, we saw a Future Foundation suit. So that'll be freaking awesome. We get to see a Peter Parker who sees the Fantastic Four. We get to see a Fantastic Four at all. That'll be awesome. In the supporting cast, we have Aunt May, obviously. Harry Osborn. I'm not sure how big of a role he's going to be playing, but he's the son of Norman. He might play a pretty big role. I'm not sure if he'll be a supportive character, but he'll be a supporting character. We have Daredevil. Not sure how long he's going to be in the show. Maybe just one episode, a cameo. But honestly, they've been teasing cameos of him a little too much, so I hope he has a little something more to do. Maybe like 2 or 3 episodes, or We have Doctor Strange, who also has been given a cameo recently in X-Men 97. It seems he might be helping out with another character on this list that I'll get to later. We have The Watcher. The Watcher has shown up in pretty much every animated series so far, so that's not too big of a surprise. But that being said, every time he has, some shit has gone down, so expect something crazy. We have Jean Falcolt, who is known as Finesse and is also Taskmaster's daughter, so that's cool. Then we have Amadeus Cho, which is awesome. We saw his mom, I forgot her name, Mrs. Cho, in the Age of Ultron movie. That was like a while ago. It makes sense for her to have a son that's probably around Peter's age in high school, so that's pretty cool. And that might confirm Amadeus Cho being present in the mainline MCU. Then we have Pearl, aka Wave. Don't know too much about this character. I recognize her from Marvel Snap though. She's from the Philippines, I believe, and she has hydrokinesis basically, so that's cool. Then we have Nico Monroe, another person that I recognize from Snap. She seemed really cool, and honestly I'm glad to be seeing her in a big project like this, because I kind of wanted to get to know the character. From what I've seen, her powers are she's basically a magic user. She has the Staff of One, which lets her cast any spell one time, which is kind of busted, but it's adequately nerfed. We saw in the still image that showed Doctor Strange. She was also there, and it looks like maybe she might be in a little trouble. So there might be some magic stuff going on in here. He might show up to help. I've also seen that she might be the best friend of Peter Parker. She's going to be filling that role, kind of like a Gwen Stacy or Ned, or like his closest friend or something like that, or childhood friend. Then we have Lonnie Lincoln, aka Tombstone, but he's not Tombstone yet. He's in high school. He might be a senior. He looks a little taller than Peter, and they look like they're friends. I originally thought when I saw that he was Harry Osborn, but apparently that's not him. It's Lonnie Lincoln, which is cool, because the one that I'm most interested really is Lonnie Lincoln. This looks like, I haven't read too many comics with Lonnie Lincoln in them, at least not with him showing his past like this, with him being so young. So I don't know if this is like a precedent of him being friends with Peter or anything like that, but this looks really cool. It looks like they're gonna be buds before they eventually clash as Spiderman and Tombstone, which is pretty dope. Tombstone has always been one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. I like the villains I get to put like some hands on them, I do think it's kind of odd. It's like, from what I know, he's usually an albino, and he like struggles with that, with his like looks and everything, and that's why he shaves his teeth to be like razor sharp or whatever. But it looks like they're not going in that direction. Not as of yet. I'm thinking that he might get his powers in an accident, and that might be what causes his deformity, or not really deformity, but just causes his discoloration in his face and in his skin and everything. Although that might look kind of crazy, because I guess not a lot of people probably know that Lonnie is a black guy. He's just albino. So if they just see a black guy just turn white from getting his powers, that might just be crazy. But hey, I hope the best. I'm just gonna keep bringing her up because I really want to see another Gwen Stacy. But I hope we see Gwen Stacy in this show. In the list of what I want from this show, it'll probably be Gwen Stacy, just some good animated sequences, an Uncle Ben sequence, like anything about Uncle Ben. I would love to see the Fantastic Four, of course, because why not? And just a long shot here, Hobie Brown. I saw in a Spectacular Spider-Man, he never got a line. I believe he got one line. I want to see my boy shine. He showed up in Across the Spider-Verse as Spider-Punk, but I just want to see a Hobie Brown who's just Hobie Brown, who could also maybe go on to be the Prowler, because he is the Prowler before Aaron Davis. So now I'm just gonna get into some speculation on what I think might happen or they might play on in this series, just the direction I think they might be going in. So similar to the Ultimate Universe, which was some of the first Spider-Man comics that I read, I like the idea of Norman Osborn creating the spider that bit Peter. And I think that that's what they might do in the show. I hope that they do that in the show, because I feel like that'd be cool. Because then we get to see Norman, who's kind of like almost obsessed with Peter Parker. He's pursuing him because he sees him kind of as property, you know, because his spider bit him and gave him his powers. Because I'm assuming he made that spider because of some kind of, maybe like a super soldier plot. He's trying to make some super soldier serum again, and he ends up making the Oz formula or some shit like that. Yeah, so he shows up to Peter's house like Tony Stark did, because he's looking for his property basically, and he tries to maybe pitch an idea of like, hey, you can come work for me, blah blah blah, like the same thing Tony did. He was like, hey, you can have this internship, you can come work for me. And then he's probably gonna do the same, oh yeah, I know you're Spider-Man, but in this reality he's like, hey, I made you gotta work for me or some shit like that. Maybe not as harsh as that. You'd probably try to smooth talk him or whatever. And I'm sure Peter would probably jump at the opportunity because he doesn't know he's bad. And if he can get resources, why not? He's a scientist. He can work at Oscorp. Maybe Oscorp is like a big company. And you know May is gonna tell him to go because we need that money. This might cause some conflict with Harry. We could probably see that abusive, kind of toxic relationship that Norman and Harry have. And that might be made even worse by Norman giving this much attention and time to Peter Parker. We have Doctor Strange showing up in this, and Nico Monroe supposedly being his like best friend, so she's probably going to play a big part. And with her playing a big part, maybe Magic is also going to be playing a big part in the series. So maybe we could get something like a Hobgoblin setup. Maybe they like subvert the Green Goblin and stuff into a Hobgoblin story. That'd be cool. I don't know how they could pull it off, but X-Men 97 pulled stuff off that people thought that they couldn't pull off. So just let them cook, I guess. I'm kind of wondering where all the villains are coming from, where they're getting their resources from, because they all seem to have like technology that they just came into somehow. And that's how they became villains. So I'm wondering who's supplying them. Maybe it's Norman. I don't know why. Maybe it's someone else. Tinker or something. Who knows? But honestly, I have really no idea where this series could go. And I'm just here for the ride. I'll take whatever they give me. Whatever they want to throw at us, I'm here for it. So when it comes to Spider-Man 4, like I said before, I kind of have some ideas of what I think, at least what I thought could happen, because, you know, as time passes and things come out, you get proven wrong in some of your little theories in your head and whatever, but sometimes you get proven right. So yeah, I'm just gonna rehash and reuse some parts of an old pitch that I have, toss out some ideas. So in No Way Home, we hear from Norman Osborn, William Dafoe. He says, there's someone living in my house. Now you could take that as, oh, it's just someone else's house. You know, he doesn't live in this universe, it's just someone else's house. What if it was Norman Osborn's house? Just not that Norman Osborn. And he just doesn't look like Willem Dafoe, so he doesn't recognize him. Am I cooking, or am I wrong here? Now I know that's like 1 out of a million to have 2 different dimensional copies live in the exact house. But hey, hear me out. What if the reason Norman Osborn did not recognize himself was because he was black? You see, this would have tied into my Giancarlo Esposito fan cast so much better if they had just pulled the trigger on him playing Norman Osborn. But now it doesn't. Well, I mean, I'm still hoping for a black Norman Osborn with waves in the MCU. They gave it to us in animation, and they told us it's kind of canon. So put 2 and 2 and make 4, please. Personally, I believe he created the spider that bit Peter. That if Tony hadn't gotten to Peter first in Civil War, the timeline that's happening in Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is what would play out in the MCU. I think Norman would have gotten to him. I think the reason why Norman has not contacted him or gotten close to him at all or gotten the chance to is because Tony was in the way. You can't really mess with that billionaire superhero. I think that's why he's kind of just been off to the side all this time. Why he hasn't gotten to enact whatever plots. Maybe he's just cooking something on the side. And with the events of No Way Home, it's not like he's gonna know about Peter anymore, even if he did before. Say he didn't know that his spider bit Peter, and then Tony Stark got to him first, and he's like, swipe or no swiping. He's like, oh shucks, and he has to just dip out. He can't do anything about that. So he just hides in the shadows, cooking up Oscorp. Maybe Oscorp does exist, it's just not as big. Or maybe it is really big and we just have not seen it. Pause. So yeah, this is why I think this story is likened to a what if story. Because it takes place on a normal timeline. But instead of Tony finding Peter, Norman does. Maybe in this universe, the whole Civil War thing doesn't happen and Tony doesn't have to go recruit Spider-Man. Really, Tony never really had to recruit Spider-Man at all. I don't know why he did that, but that's nor here nor there. So here's what I think is going to happen in Spider-Man 4. I think it's going to be a street level grounded story. No saving the world, maybe just saving New York, maybe just saving a life, maybe just preserving your own life. Maybe those are the stakes. In regards to past cast, like I said before, I'm not sure whether or not they'll make an appearance in this movie specifically. I'm sure they might return later on down the line, but in this movie specifically, I think they'd like to hammer down on the idea of Peter being isolated from everyone else, so they might not show up. If they do show up in this movie, I'm sure they'll have little to no time spent on them. So, and with MJ being out of the story, we need a new love interest. Every movie needs a love interest, right? So what about a Black Cat or Gwen or fuck it, throw a Kitty Pryde in there for no reason? I don't know. For the big villains, I'd like to see Norman Osborn and Wilson Fisk colluding and teaming up. Now, this might sound very similar to Spectacular Spider-Man. I've mentioned it a couple of times. I really like the fact, and TASM, I really like the idea of Oscorp and Norman Osborn creating the villains for Peter Parker to fight. And in this pitch, I'm just gonna really press on that idea. So yes, Norman and Fisk colluding. Maybe they are supplying each other with tech. We saw Wilson Fisk having some pretty advanced tech in Echo, his latest appearance. So maybe Norman Osborn is his supplier, perhaps. We know Norman deals in like Tony Stark. He sells weapons of war, just technology. He's at times a weapons manufacturer, so that could be what he's doing in the MCU right now. My personal theory, which would clear up some questions that I had about Wilson Fisk and Hawkeye, which is why is he so strong? I believe that maybe Wilson Fisk has Norman Osborn working on trying to create a offshoot of the Super Soldier Serum. I also believe that Wilson Fisk was the mystery buyer that was mentioned with Sharon Carter in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series. I believe that's how he got some Super Soldier Serum. Since the last person that was, working on trying to recreate it and was successfully doing so was killed by Zemo, maybe now Fisk is funding Norman in order for him to create that new Super Soldier Serum option, because that's what they were always doing in Marvel, trying to make the Super Soldier Serum. And maybe that is what leads into and up to the Oz formula, the thing that turns him into the Green Goblin. Maybe Fisk has so much faith in Norman being able to recreate that Super Soldier Serum because of his past successes with creating the spider. I think that Norman will likely still see Spider-Man as his property, like I mentioned before. Probably while not knowing it's Peter Parker, he's still trying to pursue Spider-Man and trying to coerce him into working with him. Now that he's not, at least publicly, backed by the Avengers or anything like that, he's basically fair game. Maybe Norman tracks down Spider-Man somehow. He tries to be like, hey, come join me. He's just like, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing. And because of that, with funding from Fisk, he starts creating these villains and sending them after Spider-Man, basically just to give him a tough time, showing him, hey, you're alone, you might need some help. Hey, I'm here to help you with these villains that he's really creating and sending out after him. This is what I was talking about earlier with the too many villains problem, but I think it could work. I personally, I want to see a lot more villains. Not just villains, but just bad guys. Because my pitch, if I could pitch a movie for the MCU, it would be set up over just a bunch of different films. Just having our heroes capture and put low-tier criminals into jail, even high-tier criminals, into the raft. It's going to be like a New York-based movie. Into the raft. And then we have a movie that's about the raft breakout. It could basically be like an endgame for street level movies. Wouldn't that be cool? Like, imagine you're watching a Spider-Man movie, right? And he puts away some random bad guy, almost like in Across the Spider-Verse, Miles Morales, that little montage of him just dealing with a bunch of bad guys and stuff. Something like that. And then years down the line, movies down the line, you see that bad guy come back after being imprisoned in a raft for a breakout movie, and they're just tearing up the city, making mayhem, and the heroes have to solve it. It's like a team-up movie. That would be awesome. Anyways.